I think we should stop this at this point. We are very sorry about the technical problems. There should be another trailer, I think, from a Life in a Day project, but it isn't. So, according to the question, content or technology, I would say content wins, technology not. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful film, and I enjoyed it a lot. And maybe I'll ask you the question again, Barney. What is king for you, and how you developed this wonderful film, short film, Foundling, for the Parallel Line project? Maybe you can also explain a little bit about the project itself.
Sure, yeah. So there were 5 short films commissioned by Philips through Ridley Scott Associates to promote their 21:9 TVs, which is the cinema aspect ratio. It's more or less the same as CinemaScope. And the first film that you saw was one of those 5. And then when they brought out a 3D version of that TV, which is just happening about now, they wanted to have something that they could show in the same series of films, which all share the same 6 lines of dialogue. You may have noticed that those 2 films that you saw had the same lines of dialogue. They wanted one that could work in 3D. So we made a 6th film, and it was shot entirely in stereo 3D. Of course, it's going to live partly on the internet, where it won't be viewable in 3D particularly easily. You can, of course, put anaglyph, red-blue 3D images online, and people can watch those with their red-blue glasses, but it's not a particularly great effect. So for now, the 3D experience will just be in film screenings and on TVs that will be it'll be played in stores, for example, where Philips are selling their TVs. So that was the kind of the way that the project came to me. And the really exciting thing was to be given a completely free creative brief to come up with whatever story that I wanted within those parameters of it having to be 3D, having to be roughly 5 minutes long, and having to have those 6 lines of dialogue, which is a really great brief because it gives you enough restriction to be creatively stimulated. I think if they just said, come up with a film for 3D, of course that would have been exciting, but having to use those 6 lines of dialogue was actually quite a stimulating restriction to have. And then all the other aspects of the brief were completely open, which was great. So it's been a really interesting opportunity to see how a technological sponsor, obviously Philips is an electronics company, with a digital platform for exhibiting their stuff, can still make use of very traditional storytelling and a very, in some ways, classic kind of movie-making style. Even more so, in fact, due to the 3D component, because in 3D you tend to have to let your shots run longer. You tend to have a more inclusive framing style. In fact, the whole filmmaking, storytelling in 3D filmmaking is a much more classical, cinematic kind of language, at least so far. So it was, for me, a really interesting combination of the ancient and the very modern.
Why is the storytelling more classical in 3D? Could you explain that?
Yeah, just for really simple technical reasons, which is that it takes the eye longer to absorb a 3D image. It just takes you that little bit longer for your brain to process. And so you can't have such a fast cutting pace as you might with a conventional 2D film. And secondly, the 3D effect depends partly on things coming out of the screen towards you. And those things don't look like they're coming towards you if they get cropped by the edge of the screen. So that means that everything that's forward of the screen plane needs to be within the frame. You can't, for example, have even a simple thing like an over-the-shoulder shot where you might have one person talking to another, and the first person, the person that's got their back to you, is in the foreground, and you very often just use a little bit of their head and a little bit of their shoulder just to give the shot some depth and to make the audience instinctively understand what it is they're looking at. That kind of image just doesn't work in 3D because the foreground element gets cropped by the screen, which is an odd visual phenomenon when the screen, in theory, is further away than the foreground element itself. So those 2 factors, the slower pace and the more inclusive framing, take you back to a much more kind of classical cinematic style. And finally, depth of field. 3D tends to work where everything's in focus. You don't really if you have something coming towards you that's closer to you than you would normally expect in the cinema, it's odd if that object is out of focus. The eye expects things which are physically closer to be resolvable in focus. And so inevitably you then end up with a photographic style which has more depth in it, so you're in a more kind of Citizen Kane kind of deep focus world, which again is a somewhat old-fashioned style of filmmaking.
Kind of opposite to this Parallel Lines project, there's another one called Life in a Day, and we originally want to show another trailer, so maybe it's ready now to look at it. The other one for a project which works totally in another way. You could show it, please. Thank you very much. This one, it happens. So, Mr. Arbuthnott, it's it's another project which Sir Ridley Scott is also involved with. And could you please explain this kind of innovative crowdsourcing video footage? How does it work?
So very simply, we Ridley's producing the film and Kevin MacDonald is directing it, and we asked people from all over the world to submit footage on a particular day, 24th of July 2010, and the footage had to capture what it meant to be alive for the people who were contributing, and also answer specific questions: what do you love, what do you fear, what makes you laugh, and so on. And the goal of the film is to create a huge user-generated, crowdsourced film which can act as a kind of record, hopefully quite a profound record of what it means, what it meant to be alive on that day. So I guess what's innovative about it is just the scale of it, and that was something that one can really only do with YouTube. So we had 80,000 people contributing videos and 4,500 hours of footage, out of which we'll do a number of things. One is to create a feature film that premieres at Sundance in 2011. And the other is there's all sorts of really kind of cool galleries and stuff that YouTube have created. So there are different ways to access the content that will also form part of the film.
But what's the kind of storytelling that's inside the video footage? It's only about your day, or what is it really like?
That is all in a funny way to be determined, because the film is being made as we speak. But there are all sorts of kind of thematic devices, as well as temporal ones, that could be used to structure the film. And there's also music is being used heavily. All of the contributors of the film also contributed sounds, hand claps. People had to hold a note for as long as they could, and out of this, the composer's composing a soundtrack. The feel of the film and the kind of the narrative is to be determined, but it won't be a conventional film.
But it's also technology-driven in that way that YouTube provides a platform to crowdsource 80,000 little films.
Exactly. Without, in a pre-YouTube era, it would have been impossible to do a film like this and to have a kind of, what we love the film to feel like is it has a kind of authority, because it captures the world so widely, and doing that without a platform like YouTube would be very difficult.
Do you think there is a priority to technology over the narration, or do you think it's the other way around?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I mean, clearly, on this film, which is a very anomalous film, the narrative will be in the service of the technology, but also vice versa. The two are inextricably linked, both in terms of opportunities, but also restrictions. I mean, for example, one of the defining aspects of this film will be that the quality of the footage received varies enormously because people have filmed it on either a mobile phone, or some people have used red cameras or shot on film, or amazing stuff. So the ultimate film, we are, I guess, at the mercy of what we've been sent, as opposed to being able to determine what the film is shot on, for example.
Barney, how would you decide the opponent between narration and technology, or is it a stupid question to say storytelling or content?